Earth hung in the void. A vibrant sapphire marble swirled with white clouds. Inside the orbiting station, two astronauts pressed their faces against the reinforced glass. "Look at those currents," one whispered, tracing the patterns over the Pacific. "It is almost too perfect to be real." Below, life thrived in the rhythmic pulse of the tides. Then, the rhythm broke. On a crowded beach, a father held his daughter's hand as the surf suddenly retreated with a violent, sucking sound. The ocean did not ebb. It vanished, pulling back with a deafening roar. It exposed miles of jagged, steaming seabed in seconds. The wet sand hissed as the sun hit the deep-sea silt. "Dad, the water is running away!" the girl cried, pointing at the horizon. The father did not answer. He stared at the retreating line of foam. The horizon was empty. The sea had simply ceased to be. A profound, unnatural silence settled over the shore, broken only by the sound of gulls circling over the drying, exposed crust of the planet. By evening, the great rivers were nothing but cracked, gray scars carving through the continent. Fish lay gasping in the drying mud, their scales dulling in the heat. A boy knelt by the bank, his fingers brushing the parched earth where the river had roared only hours before. He pushed his hand into the fissure, seeking dampness, but found only dust. The panic followed the heat. In city centers, massive screens flickered with emergency broadcasts, their light reflecting off the desperate, hollow faces of thousands. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the streets as the last crates of bottled water were torn from shelves. People shoved, climbed over one another, and fought in the aisles. The orderly rhythm of life had dissolved into a hunt for survival. Every store was a trap, every bottle of water a prize worth violence. The grid groaned under the strain of a population suddenly realizing there was no relief coming. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sirens began to wail, but there was no one left to respond to the calls. The collapse was no longer approaching. It was here. The sun remained an unrelenting, white eye in the sky. Forests that had stood for centuries turned to ash, the leaves curling and disintegrating into gray flakes that coated the landscape. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of suspended dust and the scorched scent of a dying world. Every breath became a labor. In sterile, underground bunkers, scientists huddled around monitors that displayed only jagged heat signatures. One researcher watched the data stream, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. He tossed his clipboard aside, the metal clattering loudly in the cramped, silent room. "The atmosphere is failing," he muttered, his voice raspy and dry. "The moisture is gone. We are just breathing fire now." The data confirmed his words. The oxygen levels were plummeting as the air itself seemed to burn away. Outside, the wind picked up, but it brought no cooling relief, only a scouring, abrasive grit that choked the life from the survivors. The sky turned a bruised, sickly yellow, and the horizon blurred into a wall of suffocating haze. Panic was replaced by a hollow, breathless exhaustion. Humanity was no longer fighting for resources. They were simply waiting for the air to run out. The final light in the cities died as the grid collapsed, the last hum of machinery fading into a hollow, absolute silence. Without the cooling systems, the concrete structures turned into ovens. People retreated into the shadows, but the heat followed them. Above the surface, the world was changing into something unrecognizable. Where the oceans had once churned, a vast, desolate expanse of salt and mud now stretched toward the horizon. Explorers moved across this new, jagged terrain, their boots crunching rhythmically over the exposed seabed. They walked past the skeletal remains of ancient shipwrecks, their hulls stripped bare and bleached white by the sun. The rusted metal cages of cargo ships lay tilted at impossible angles, half buried in the silt. Further out, they stumbled upon the ruins of deep-sea structures, long-lost ruins that had never seen the light of day until this final, dry hour. These were not just wrecks. They were tombstones in a global graveyard, marking the end of everything that had once thrived in the deep. The wind whistled through the jagged, exposed rock formations, a dry, mournful sound that carried no promise of rain. The planet had become a silent tomb, its history laid bare in the dust, waiting for the last of the light to fade. Deep beneath the surface, in a concrete basement where the light had long ago retreated to shadows, a mother held her child tight. The air was thin, tasting of nothing but dust and stale time. Outside, the wind whistled a dry, high-pitched scream that scraped against the foundation. The child looked up, eyes wide and unblinking in the gloom. Will it ever rain again? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The mother pulled the child closer, her gaze fixed on the dark, unyielding ceiling. She had no words left to give. Above them, the planet was no longer a jewel. It was a bruised brown sphere, dead and silent, spinning through a void that offered no mercy. High above the atmosphere, a single, microscopic droplet of water drifted in the emptiness. It caught the faint, dying light of a distant star, reflecting a world that had once breathed with life. The droplet trembled, a tiny, fragile mirror of a history now erased. Then, it shivered. It flattened, stretched, and vanished into the absolute black. The blue planet was gone. There was only the spinning rock, the silence, and the cold, eternal dark.